This video is brought to you by Ridge and their new lineup of travel goods, including their commuter backpack, their carry-on luggage, and their all-new check-in luggage. I took all three of these with me to LA for Summer Games Fest, and they each impressed the hell out of me. Get 10% off them by clicking the link below and using offer code SkillUpTravel, or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, hello, welcome, lovely to see you. Please pull up a seat, make yourself comfortable. This week is, it's a bit of a chilled one, setting the tone for what is likely to be a very skint July absent any major releases. This week's show is absent any earth-shattering, industry-redefining news. It's a bit quiet out there, to be honest, but that's kind of nice, since it lets us dig a little deeper into some stories we might otherwise have to canter through, plus it lets us cover some stuff we might not have covered. I personally like having a bit of a break from the relentless onslaught of crazy, ridiculous, insane news, and given that June had plenty of that, a nice gentle ease into July is a-okay in my book. Having said all that, it's nice to know that Capcom are working on the next Resident Evil game. Just yesterday, Capcom held one of their webinars. This one was called Capcom Next Summer 2024, and it was a look at some of what we should expect from Capcom over the next few months and years. On the months end of the equation, they announced that a demo for Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess is now available. Now, I actually played a build of this at Summer Games Fest, and I really liked it. I went into it thinking it was kind of like a character action game, because Capcom have done a terrible job of marketing this. Turns out it's actually a tower defense style game where you have to deploy troops to hold back hordes of demons while you escort a goddess on her pilgrimage. It's very simple, it's a bit quaint, but it's visually beautiful and the action is oddly satisfying and the progression stuff is well paced and meaningful. What struck me most is that it has this almost indie-like quality to it in its design, its visual style, its scale, and I love that Capcom are backing something like this since I'm always a fan of big publishers putting out smaller titles. After that, Capcom revealed a remaster of the game we've all been begging for since Capcom started remastering all of their PS1 era classics. I'm talking, of course, about Wait, no, it's not that one. I'm talking about No, it's not that one either. It's Dead Rising. That's right. If you didn't see that one coming, you're not alone, since it does feel like a number of games in Capcom's portfolio are a little bit more deserving of the remaster treatment, but Dead Rising is a lot easier to pull off than those other ones, since this was originally released back in 2006 and was a fully 3D third-person action game. Capcom are betting on the enduring appeal of the game and have confirmed that the gameplay will be exactly the same as you remember it, but some quality of life changes have been added, like autosave and some new UI. This one sits in that blurry grey zone between remaster and remake, since the game is technically being remade in RE Engine, hence the massive increase in visual fidelity plus support for 4K 60 FPS, so that kind of makes it a remake, right? But if you're not touching any of the core gameplay, and it's clearly a little bit on the dated side, then that kind of makes it a remaster, right? See what I mean? Either way, it doesn't matter. Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster is a pleasant surprise and it's headed to all platforms on September 19th. To finish off, Capcom reminded everyone that Resident Evil 7 is now on iOS and Mac devices. More on the reasons for them doing that one later. And at the end of that segment, they offered the first official confirmation that the next Resident Evil game is in development. If it's a numbered entry, it will be Resident Evil 9, but it doesn't have an official title at this point. It's being directed by one Koshi Nakanashi, who previously directed Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil Revelations, and Resident Evil The Mercenaries 3D. So obviously this guy's got more than a little bit of experience. During the Capcom webinar, he teased what he and his team have got cooking, saying, quote, "It was difficult to figure out what to do after Resident Evil 7, but I found it, and to be honest, it feels substantial. I can't share any details yet, but I hope you're excited for the day I can," end quote. As a big fan of Resident Evil 7, I am very excited indeed. Pivoting back to remakes for a moment, Ubisoft have announced that they have ambitious plans to remake a number of Assassin's Creed titles. Speaking in an internal interview with their head of editorial, Lucy O'Brien, Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot had this to say when asked about the future of the AC franchise, quote, "Firstly, players can be excited about some remakes, which will allow us to revisit some of the games we've created in the past and modernize them. There are worlds in some of our older Assassin's Creed games that are still extremely rich," end quote. This announcement follows a Kotaku report from last year that said that the best Assassin's Creed of all time, Black Flag, was getting a remaster courtesy of Ubisoft in Singapore, the studio that labored for the better part of a decade to push out the very underwhelming Skull and Bones. The theory goes that that studio developed plenty of assets and tech that would make a remaster for Black Flag easy, but it is more than a little ironic that the game that was meant to advance the Black Flag formula failed so badly that now its best contribution to the world of video games will be as a scaffold on which a remake of Black Flag can be built. hilt. Still, if it allows me to step back into the boots of Edward Kenway, I will dance with the devil himself. None of this is confirmed, by the way, so be sure to not get too carried away like I just did. From remakes and remasters to reboots, Sega provided an update on where they're planning to take us for the next Crazy Taxi outing. We heard about this a while back when Sega were positioning their weird super game initiative, where they were planning to get back into the AAA space in a big way without being exactly clear about how they were going to do that. Eventually, it was revealed that they were doing a big nostalgia push, reviving old franchises like Altered Beast, Golden Axe, Jet Set Radio, and Crazy Taxi. Fast forward to last week, Sega released a promo video aiming to recruit development talent. In it, Crazy Taxi series producer Kenji Kano says that it's being treated as an entirely new Crazy Taxi, so not a remake or a remaster. Apparently, it's shaping up to be an open-world MMO light style experience with dynamic multiplayer, so I guess like The Crew, but Crazy Taxi, and I think that would be kind of cool, I guess. Sega also confirmed that it's being made in Unreal Engine and that it's a AAA title, so expect to be paying $70 for this one. Man, I still question the decision of making this game as big as it sounds like it's gonna be. I sure hope Sega know what they're doing. With Destiny 2 the final shape in the rearview mirror, Bungie have finally begun talking about their plans for the future of the franchise, and right now their plans are circumspect, or at least the way they're talking about them is. Bungie seems to be very pleased with the reception to the final shape, as well they should be, as the expansion is the highest rated in the history of Destiny, one of the highest rated releases of the year on OpenCritic, and it sits at a very respectable 81% very positive on Steam. The question that's loomed large over that impressive release has always been, what's next? Well, according to Bungie, they have absolutely no plans to wind down Destiny. Speaking to Edge magazine, the assistant game director Robbie Stevens said that the new episodic structure is going to allow them to drop content more regularly, but that content will vary in size from one drop to the next. He also says that the coming year is about setting up for the future of the franchise. Quote, Episode 1 Echoes is meant to send a clear signal to players, to everyone who loves Destiny, that this isn't the end, it's a new beginning, end quote. He go on to talk about what's in store for next year, an area of particular interest since it's as yet unclear if Bungie still plans to maintain their annual expansion cadence. He said this, quote, a lot of the thinking about year 11 and how we start really getting into the next journey here after these episodes, we're going to be leaning on that thinking as well, because we've been doing this linear thing for a while now and we want to get back to expanding our worlds and world building, expanding the universe of Destiny in general, and I think that's as much as I should probably say about it, end quote. It is of course unsurprising to learn that Bungie plan to keep the Destiny train rolling. They are working hammer and tongs on Marathon, sure, but Destiny is still one of the top 10 most played games on Steam every day, and you don't walk away from a player base that large and engaged. If you're wondering where my final shape review is, by the way, it's coming. I've now finished the campaign, I've done the raid, I'm deep in the power grind and focused on mopping up endgame quests. I have a lot to say about it and I'm writing it up at the moment. Review should be out next week. As they say in Japan, please look forward to it. Plenty of lightning round stories for this week, so let's just jump into it. The final signups for EVO 2024 have now concluded, and it's a record breaker. This year, 10,224 competitors will be fighting for the top spots, making EVO 2024 the largest esport event ever in terms of the number of competitors. It's a more than 10% increase over last year and points to not only a very healthy fighting game scene, but a very healthy EVO at a time when many esports events are struggling to maintain their viewership and relevance. So it's a good news story for EVO, but a bad news story for Mortal Kombat, at least when it comes to the competitive scene. EVO releases a breakdown of the number of competitors who have signed up per game, and unsurprisingly, Street Fighter was the most represented with 5,200 signups. Tekken 8 got a very, very respectable 4,600 signups, a record for that franchise at EVO. Guilty Gear Strive, Granblue Fantasy Versus, and Street Fighter 3 Third Strike all had solid signups between 1,000 and 2,000 players, but right down near the bottom of the list at only 645 signups was Mortal Kombat 1. MK1 sold 3 million units in 2 months. It took Street Fighter 6 months to sell the same amount, so why is the competitive scene so barren? Well, surely a big contributing factor is the fact that Mortal Kombat is banned due to its violence in Japan, Korea, and China. Those are some pretty big esports scenes, particularly for fighting games. At the same time, NetherRealm and Warner Brothers have done little to foster a competitive scene, a point that Edmond detailed at length in a recent Patreon write-up on Multiverses and how its single-player progression focus hampers the growth of a competitive scene. If you'd like to check that out, that's free to all over on the Patreon. I'll leave a link to that below the like button. One last bit of fighting game news. The next Street Fighter live-action movie is now slated for March 2026. The film recently lost its directors, the Philippou twins, and is now in search of another, hence the delay. Kind of feels like you shouldn't be setting any release date until you have a director locked in, but I guess Hollywood types see it differently. Incidentally, the original 1994 film starring Van Damme and Kylie Minogue still rakes in thousands of bucks a year, at least according to Capcom's most recent financial reporting. Nice to know there are still some people ironically enjoying that one all these years later. Got an Amazon Fire TV thingy mabobby? Well, if you do, you've now got an Xbox, sort of. Microsoft announced that they're bringing cloud gaming to Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K and 4K Max devices. It's basically the same thing as that Samsung app on TVs that gives you a window into Game Pass. You can play Fortnite for free using that, but if you want to play anything else, you will need a Game Pass subscription. Still, not a bad path into the Xbox ecosystem if you were looking for one that's rolling out over the coming weeks, so check official channels to see when it's live for your device. There's a lot of talk about certain people being too old right now, but you know who's 71 still crushing it? Shigeru Miyamoto. During a recent Nintendo shareholder meeting, he was asked about his age and health, and he rather candidly shared that Nintendo are very focused on developing the next generation of talent. Quote, "I consider Nintendo's generational handover to be progressing smoothly. We have developers that are young and brilliant," end quote. He explained that most of the work is now being done by younger developers at this point, though he's still very involved in the development of Pikmin Bloom. He says he's transferred know-how to the next generation and wants to make sure the one beneath that benefits too. Man, imagine a company developing long-term talent rather than just firing them every year to shore up their annual growth numbers. American CEOs will say it's fake. Steam says that since 2018, controller usage has tripled and is now at about 15% of total playtime. The Steam Deck accounts for just 10% of that growth, so my suspicion is that more people are plugging PCs into their TV in place of a console. That's certainly what I do, and it's great. Incidentally, 60% of controller usage is with an Xbox controller. The console may not be doing too crash hot, but the controller is going better than ever. You all finished Shadow of the Erd Tree yet? If you put it down after getting stuck on a tricky boss, then good news, FromSoft caved and buffed the Shadow Tree fragments, giving you even more bonus power to help crush you through those difficult encounters. Steam reviews seem to be happy about it, with the expansion going from mixed to mostly positive, with the current batch of negative reviews mainly centered on poor PC performance, something FromSoft are hopefully working on right now. Speaking of Elden Ring, it looks like we may be getting a film or TV adaptation. That's according to a pretty good source, the lawmaster himself, George R.R. Martin. When asked about a possible adaptation, he said this, quote, "Oh, and about those rumors you may have heard about a feature film or television series based on Elden Ring, I have nothing to say. Not a word. Nope, not a thing. I know nothing. You never heard a peep from me. Mum. What rumor?" End quote. Nice, George. Very subtle, my dude. Those iOS ports of AAA games appear to be kind of bombing. Apple has made a big push into this space recently as their silicon has made playing games like Death Stranding, Resident Evil, and Assassin's Creed Mirage possible on mobile devices. The thing is, it seems like people just aren't buying them. MobileGamer.biz has data from a range of third-party analysts, and apparently AC Mirage has sold less than 3,000 copies, RE4 Remake has sold roughly 7,000 copies, Death Stranding is at around 10,000, and RE Village tops it out at 34,000 units sold. These are pretty dire numbers, but it's important to remember that you need to have an iPhone 15 Pro to play these, or an M1 iPad. Furthermore, these aren't marketed super aggressively, and this is just the beginning of this push. With the next generation of Apple iPhone launches, I do expect it'll be a lot cheaper and easier to play games like this, so I wouldn't count Apple out on this stuff just yet. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, the Telltale-made Sam & Max games have been quietly getting remastered over the last little while. Sam & Max Saves the World was remastered back in 2020, Beyond Time and Space got a remaster in 2022, and now, some 2 years later, the third game in the episodic series is getting its glow up. The Devil's Playhouse features all the things you'd expect from a remaster, including new lighting, lip sync, new cinematography, newly recorded music, and more. It was just announced for all platforms, and it'll arrive on August 14th. Speaking of remasters, I got some good news and some bad news. The good news is that Star Wars Bounty Hunter is getting a remaster. Alright, not bad. You ready for the bad news? It's being handled by Aspyr Media, the company that put out those god-awful Battlefront remasters recently, and the company that so badly botched a Knights of the Old Republic remake that the project had to be taken off them and given to Saber Interactive, who have since remained very tight-lipped about where that project is at. Star Wars Bounty Hunter released back in 2002 for the PS2 and GameCube, and it wasn't exactly the greatest Star Wars game, but back then we didn't know how good we had it, since the sequel trilogy wasn't even a twinkle in Bob Iger's eye, and we genuinely thought that the Christmas special was the lowest Star Wars was ever going to go. Regardless, it's nice to see this one being brought back, but having it helmed by Aspyr is more than a little concerning. Hopefully they rise to the occasion and redeem themselves, because the memory of that Battlefront flop still looms pretty large. This one launches August 1st this year, and damn, that's really soon actually. Literally 3.5 months after they released the Battlefront collection. What's that old saying? I got a bad feeling about this. Here's something cool. While Capcom are busy remaking their classic Resident Evil games, they're also releasing the originals on PC, and they're not just dumping them there, they're ensuring that they work on modern hardware, and they're adding rendering and quality of life improvements like modern controller support. So the first cab off the rank is RE1, but Capcom have said that the sequels will soon follow. It's exclusive to GOG, or Good Old Games, the CD Projekt Red owned storefront that focuses on DRM-free releases, meaning that you truly own your games, unless they're online dependent, of course. Nice to know that you can still experience the originals without needing to buy an old console or whatever, especially given that the version of RE1 that they've got here is the actual original, whereas the one that's on Steam is actually a PC port of the GameCube remake. This one is available right now, and as I said, it's exclusive to GOG. Okay, have you ever heard of El Paso Elsewhere? No, fair enough. It was only a small game that didn't get a lot of press, but it was kind of like Max Payne, but more colorful and with demons instead of hired goons. Great game, and the studio behind it, Strange Scaffold, is just about to release their next game. It's called Click-Olding, and be sure to not let the autocorrect kick in when you're doing a Google search for that one. Click-Olding is a game where you're held hostage by a madman and you need to keep pressing a clicker in order to appease him. This one's actually being published by Outer Sloth, the new publishing label from the makers of Among Us that was announced during the Summer Games Fest. Studio boss Zalavan Nelson Jr. said of his team's latest project, quote, "We exist in a time when it's hard for a game to be allowed to exist if it doesn't fit into a clear genre or audience demographic. This is another project that says video games should still step into new, uncomfortable, and undeniably compelling spaces," end quote. Well said, this one arrives on July 16th, exclusive to PC. Is this next game Red Dead Redemption 3? I'll let you be the judge. Roll it, Stu.
It's not often we see new faces in town, but, I reckon you've ridden in at just the right time. Here on the range, in the land of the free, we live a simple life. Take a load off. I'll give you a lay of the land.
If you're at all wondering, yes, that is the voice of Roger Clark, aka Arthur Morgan from Red Dead 2, and he's going full Arthur Morgan here, he ain't holding back. Sadly though, that is the limit to the connection between this game and Rockstar's literary opus, as Cattle Country is not an immersive cowboy simulator set in a devastatingly detailed open world, but is instead a cozy game about building, harvesting crops, and just being a nice cowboy person in a nice cowboy town. It's not exactly the freshest game premise we've ever seen, but hey, we'll take what few Roger Clark performances we can get. There's no date for this one yet, but it's just been announced for PC. 2 playtest announcements for the week actually, and the first is for the Riot fighting game Project L, which was of course renamed to the far less iconic 2XKO. This has been in development forever, but it appears as though we're getting to the business end as Riot has just announced a closed alpha that will run from the 9th to the 18th of August. It's for PC, PS5, and Xbox, but it's only available in the US, Canada, the UK, France, Brazil, Japan, and Mexico. RIP everywhere else, including Australia. I know Edmond will be disappointed about that one since he loves him some fighting games. A playtest we can take part in, however, is Concord, the hero shooter that Sony unveiled at their most recent webinar, and people did not like what they saw. Personally, I'm reserving judgment until I play it for myself, and a recent round of previews was encouraging, and that they all basically had positive things to say, even if none of them were glowing. The playtest is for both PC and PS5. It's happening over 2 blocks. The first is for pre-order customers only and will happen on the 12th to the 14th of July, and an open beta takes place on the 18th to 21st of July. One pre-order does come with 5 codes for the game, meaning you can rope your friends in. Crossplay will be active, so KBM people will be able to freely farm those controller users, and the full 16-player roster will be available so you can test everyone out and find out what's broken. This one comes from a bunch of former Destiny developers who spun up their own studio that was purchased by Sony without even having released a game. That's encouraging on one level, so let's hope that Concord has at least some of the sauce that made Helldivers such a massive smash hit earlier this year. 2 delay announcements for the week. The first is from Don't Nod. They're working on the next Life is Strange, but they're also working on something called Lost Records Bloom and Rage, another narrative-led mystery about a summer that 4 friends promised they would never speak of ever again. This one was targeting this year, but has now been pushed into sometime next year. Don't Nod saying they wanted to give both this and Life is Strange enough room to shine. Fair enough. The other delay is a bit of a bummer, to be honest with you. Frostpunk 2 was meant to drop this month, and in fact it was basically the only bigger video game dropping this month, since July is pretty sparse. I don't call it dry July for nothing. Anyway, the developer 11-Bit Studios says the delay is due to feedback the game got during a beta test held 2 months ago. They said the feedback they got was that the game was like an 8 out of 10, and they think they can do better than that with some more time. According to them, they're adding, quote, new additions to the game mechanics, extensive UI and UX enhancements, and by popular demand, a new city feature we like to call Zoom Stories, end quote. The new release date is set for September 20th, which is wide open at this point, so that's a great time to launch. Very much looking forward to this one. Oddly enough, there was actually one playtest cancellation announcement this week, and it's for Space Marine 2. Not gonna lie, don't like this news one bit. So this drops pretty soon actually. September 9th, the developers Saber Interactive were planning a beta test prior to release, since this game supports both PvE co-op and PvP. So yeah, a beta is what you do to ensure all of that stuff works at scale come launch day. This week though, the developers announced that beta test would not go ahead. Not delayed, mind you, just straight up cancelled. They explained it thusly, quote, Space Marine 2 is almost ready. We are now entirely focused on optimization, polish, and fixing remaining issues ahead of launch on September 9th. This means we will not run a public online beta, as it would take the development teams away from preparing the full launch, and our priority is to ensure the best possible experience at release, end quote. Now look, I'm no game dev expert, in fact, I know next to nothing, but I do know that beta tests are one of the things that you do to ensure the best possible experience at release. And history is littered with the bones of multiplayer games that launched without running betas, only for everything to absolutely explode come launch day, since none of it was properly tested at scale. It seems like it would have been far better for Saber to delay the game to allow for a proper beta to take place, rather than cancel the beta so the game can still release on time. That never pre-order rule always holds, but I would be especially cautious with this one. Definitely wait for reviews to see how this one lands, given that the multiplayer stuff is going to be coming in pretty hot. So what came out last week? Well, it was nice to see Luigi's Mansion 2 get a second or third lease on life. This is a remake of the classic DS game made playable on the Switch and given a nice graphical glow up, because why not? The remaster released last week, and reviews were respectable, but a touch below what the most recent Luigi's Mansion 3 got when it debuted at a mighty 85 on OpenCritic. Luigi's Mansion 2 HD sits at a strong 78. IGN scored it an 8 out of 10, saying, quote, if you're a newcomer to the series, or perhaps you only came on board with Luigi's Mansion 3 and are working your way backwards, then there's plenty of ghost busting and puzzle solving fun for you to find in Luigi's Mansion 2's HD's 5 haunted houses. However, if you're a fan of the original Nintendo 3DS version, and you're hoping for more dramatic gameplay changes or additions, then you may well be a touch disappointed, end quote. Edmond also played this one, and he had similar things to say, quote, I love the original, and I'm pleased it's given a good looking HD treatment for posterity. Though as someone who enjoyed it on the 3DS, the lack of meaningful changes other than remastered visuals had me thinking twice about committing to a full replay, and I'd argue that the cumbersome charms of the game, its weird controls, its intimate perspective, and its grainy, spooky visuals have been lost in the process of transferring it from a small, weird 3D touchscreen handheld to a console that's sharper and more capable, end quote. Kinda like how seeing the town of Silent Hill at high-res 4K is always gonna look kinda weird no matter how good a job they do of it. Biggest release of the week was no doubt Final Fantasy XIV's latest expansion, Dawn Trail, and man, so far things are not going super well. Recall that the previous two expansions, Shadowbringers and Endwalker, were universally hailed as some of the best experiences that the MMORPG genre has to offer, praised in particular for their characters, story, dungeon design, and unique classes. Shadowbringers built a tremendous amount of momentum for the franchise, while Endwalker was an almighty crescendo that brought the game's first 10-year saga to a close. Dawn Trail is meant to be the beginning of a new saga, and it seems to be a bit of a slow start. No critic reviews up for this one yet, as everyone's still working through it, and the game didn't officially launch until yesterday. Everyone else was playing through an early access period up to that point. Those people who were playing are not leaving very many positive Steam reviews. The expansion currently sits at a mixed 58% on Steam, with many of the negative reviews saying that the expansion is just kinda boring, and that's coming from rusted-on players who have been playing the game since A Realm Reborn. There is plenty of positive feedback for the two newly added classes or jobs, but for a game so leveraged into its story and characters, it was always going to be tricky to move beyond that story and those characters. According to these early reviews, Square Enix haven't managed to pull it off, but we'll check back in next week when critics have had a look and when more people have had the chance to experience it for themselves. Same sort of story for the first Descendant, which launched just yesterday for all platforms bar Switch. This is that free-to-play third-person looter shooter from Nexon. They did run a closed beta over the weekend, which got some solid feedback, but the game proper arrived yesterday, so we'll check back in next week to see how it's landed. So what's coming out this week? Well, biggest release dropping this week is certainly Zenless Zone Zero, available for PC and mobile devices. This is the next game from miHoYo, the undisputed kings of the gacha game at this point, delivering premium experiences that engage core gamers who are otherwise totally disinterested in this sort of stuff. With Genshin Impact, miHoYo delivered a sweeping fantasy-inspired setting, but here in ZZZ, they're going for an urban sci-fi thing, and you know what? The aesthetics and style here are so good that it's even got me interested interested. And that's before we even start talking about the combat, which plays like a character action game and by all accounts is excellent. This one arrives on July 4th, but you can pre-register for it now for mobile devices. For PC, it's exclusive to the Epic Game Store, and that's an exclusive deal that actually makes sense, because I can absolutely see how a game like this helps Epic win market share, given the type of gamer it's going to pull in, so no qualms there. I'm actually going to be too busy to cover this one as I'm still working on my Destiny 2 review, but luckily Austin is on the case. He's currently reviewing it, so you should expect his review in the next little while, and if you don't want to miss out, be sure to subscribe and ding the notification bell so you'll know the minute that video goes live. The Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak, first released in 2021 for the PS4. A part of the Trails series of JRPGs, this one never actually saw an English translation, so a fan project was working on it until they got a cease and desist from the publisher. Obviously, the publisher had their own plans to localize this game, and now those plans are about to come to fruition as Trails Through Daybreak launches for the PlayStation and Switch on the 5th. There is actually a sequel to this one called Trails Through Daybreak 2. Currently, that is Japanese only, so you have to guess that the localization process for that one will begin right after this one launches. Spin Rhythm XD is basically DJ Hero, except not, because, you know, they don't own the rights to that franchise, so they can't make games for it. Luckily, they can do everything but that, and Spin Rhythm XD is basically the only thing keeping the DJ Hero dream alive at this point. It originally launched on PC in early access way back in 2019, and then late last year hit 1.0. Now it's headed to PlayStation, where it'll support PSVR 2, which, yeah, that sounds pretty awesome actually. It arrives on the 9th of July. And finally, Once Human arrives exclusive to the PC on the 9th. So this is kind of interesting. This is from Starry Studio. Kind of hard to find information about them, to be honest. I read claims that they're a subsidiary of NetEase, other reports saying they aren't. It's not exactly clear where this development team is located, but it's believed to be China. Not a lot of pre-release marketing for this one, which is risky since it's a free-to-play open-world survival game set in a post-apocalyptic world overrun by demons. Given how stuff like The Day Before landed, I'm generally pretty skeptical of any open-world survival game that didn't do a lot of very public beta testing prior to launch, and from the looks of things, these guys didn't do that. The trailers are pretty light on detail, and the gameplay looks a little janky. I don't know, hopefully I'm just being paranoid. Either way, it is free to play, so there isn't too much risk in checking it out. Like I said, it arrives on the 9th for PC only. We'll check back in on the reviews next week. Okay, before I show you this week's Put This On Your Radar, I would first like to attempt to pronounce the title of it. Planeten Verteidigungskommandant. Planeten Verteidigungskanonen-Kommandant. Okay, I think that's as close as I'm going to get it. Roll it, Stu. This is no, fuck it. You know what? This is PVKK, or Planetary Defense Cannon Commander. It is super weird, but super cool. Remember that big cannon in Junon in Final Fantasy VII? Now imagine you're in charge of firing and maintaining that thing. The developers describe it this way, quote, "Operate your planetary defense cannon to fend off an interplanetary invasion from the comfort of your cozy bunker. You're here to stay, so obey your superiors, press the right buttons, and sip your daily tea ration. It's good for you," end quote. You get the sense that something a little odd is lurking under the surface here, but the premise, the visual style, and the inclusion of FMV is more than enough to get me fully on board. This is an indie title from developer Bip and Bits, self-published, and oh my god, I just realized as I was writing this that this is the same team behind Dome Keeper, a game that I absolutely loved. Goddamn, man, I'm super pumped for this now. It's straight on my wish list, and if you want to put it on yours too, I've added it to my Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other Put This On Your Radar stuff I've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and it is the first week of the month, so it's time to go sort of shopping. Epic kicks us off as always. Right now, they've got some good stuff. Sunless Skies is a wholly unique narrative game about piloting a steampunk train through a horrific hellscape. That one disappears at the end of the week though, replaced by The Falconeer, an aerial combat game where you play as a bird. It's solid enough, stronger in the visuals than it is in the playing, but definitely worth checking out given that you don't get too many aerial combat games these days. The PS Plus lineup for July has been confirmed, and it's not much. An NHL game if you live somewhere cold, Among Us in case you're one of the 4 people on planet Earth who hasn't purchased that video game yet, and Borderlands 3 in case you want a dose of some of the worst writing ever willed into a video game. If you mute the dialogue, Borderlands 3 is pretty rad, but listen to the words at your peril. The Xbox Game Pass refresh snuck in just as we were wrapping up this episode. If you are struggling with insomnia, then Cricket 2024 ought to fix you right up. Journey to the Savage Planet is short, sweet, and plenty funny in its own quirky way. Tchia is a nice little adventure game that scored a few Game of the Year nods from various outlets, but by far and away the best additions are the speedrunning first-person shooter Neon White, as well as the detective game Case of the Golden Idol. Both of these went on to win multiple Game of the Year awards in different categories from different outlets. Very nice additions to the Game Pass lineup. Finally, Amazon is still giving away stuff like it's going out of style thanks to Prime Day, which happens later this month, and they're trying to get us all in the mood for it. Right now, in addition to a bunch of stuff I listed last week, you can now get Baldur's Gate 2 Enhanced Edition, Cat Quest 2, the very solid Midnight Fight Express, and Game of the Generation Maneater, an unironically great video game. Like, all jokes aside, it's very good. These games alone are pretty great, but like I said, there are plenty more on the list this month, so be sure to log into Prime Gaming if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber. You will not be disappointed. Our feel-good story for the week isn't actually a story, it's just something funny I saw from a streamer called Stormfall while she was playing some Sea of Thieves. I think you guys will like it. Roll it, Stu.
Would you happen to know where Haywood is?
Haywood, I think it's,
Yes, Haywood, you blow me.
Motherfucker! Kill them! Shoot them now!
Man, I really gotta go back and check out Sea of Thieves one of these days. I feel like this sort of shit is just like 90% of the game at this point. If I am to ever do it, it certainly won't be this week, as I am still neck deep in Destiny and loving it. Like I said, review out for that next week. Austin's Zenless Zone Zero review will be out at some point between now and then. And after that, I don't know, to be honest. July is that sort of month where you just kind of have to take it as it comes. Either way, we'll still keep the news show rolling each and every week, so if you'd like to come back, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. If you enjoyed yourself today, then we'd love it if you could drop the video a like, maybe even a cheeky comment below just to say hello. That's all, folks. Thanks for watching, and a big thanks to this video's sponsor, Ridge. Alright, new products from this video's sponsor, Ridge. This is always exciting because whatever Ridge put out, they nail. Their Ridge wallet is what made them famous, a cutting-edge glow-up for your wallet that keeps your cards safe both physically and from RFID scams. It comes in a range of styles and materials and just looks fantastic no matter what you pick. Been using it for years now and would never go back to using a traditional leather wallet. They also do their key case, which organizes your keys like their wallets do your cards. Sleek, simple, and so much more comfortable than those big messy clumps of keys stabbing into your thigh all the time. So like I said, anything Ridge do, they crush it. And recently they moved into the world of travel goods, and they have delivered some truly excellent kit that's seen me make a full transition over to their complete lineup. So what's in that lineup? Well, for starters, it's their newly refreshed commuter backpack. This is an all-timer for Ridge. I used to use the previous commuter backpack as my daily driver, and now this one is just better. With reconfigured storage, meaning I can organize things easier than ever before. This fits my laptop, iPad, Steam Deck, headphones, charging bricks, and so much more with ease. Plus, it's super comfortable with some great solid straps that provide a lot of support. Last year when I traveled to the Game Awards, I took this thing with me, the Ridge Carry-On. It comes in a range of colors, as most Ridge products do, making it easy to match with your backpack, wallet, and key case. It's weatherproof to the point where you can actually hose this thing down while you've got stuff in it and it'll stay dry. It's got a 30% thicker shell than standard carry-ons, and you can really feel that density, but you definitely don't feel the weight. The wheels are oversized and spin a full 360, making it super easy to maneuver, and the handle is awesome. It is so big and so easy to grip, it's textured so it won't slip, and it glides so smoothly when you engage that mechanism. It even has a little hidden compartment thing for stashing a GPS tracker. Very handy. So I really love this carry-on to the point where I wish there was also a larger check-in luggage that I could use as well, and now that exists too. This is the all-new Ridge check-in luggage. It's basically just a bigger version of the carry-on, and that's perfect because the carry-on did everything I needed and more. I took it with me to Summer Games Fest earlier this month and absolutely loved it. Now I have a complete set of matching luggage. Plus, you notice these little plate things on the front? Ridge does offer custom faceplates, allowing you to personalize your luggage even further. It's a nice little touch. Here's the thing, we all know the big luggage brands. I've used all of them over the years, and I can honestly say that I've never been as satisfied with a piece of luggage as I have with these. Ridge makes stuff for us. Functional, durable, stylish, and very reasonably priced given the quality that you're getting. I really do recommend them, and if you want to grab one for yourself at a discount, then you can visit ridge.com/skilluptravel and use offer code skilluptravel to check out for a 10% discount. That link below is pinned in the comment, ridge.com/skilluptravel and offer code skilluptravel at checkout. Thanks Ridge for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.